Hi everyone. So I'm Vanessa. I'm a six-year PhD student in the biomedical graduate studies at Penn. I'm also an intern in the Office of Research and Diversity Training. And today we are with John, who we will be talking to, and he will give us advice for a virtual interview. So John, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm John. As Vanessa said, I'm a postbac at the University of Pennsylvania in the Penn Prep program. I currently work with Dr. Casey Brown, and I took my interviews about last month.
Great. All right, so we'll get started. And so the first question I have for you is how did you feel during your either like during your interview or like right before your interview? If you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I was pretty nervous. I I got my interview list of who was gonna interview me about a week beforehand,
Hmm.
but just the idea is like, okay, I need to prepare, I need to think, I need to know what they're doing. That was That was a bit rallying me, especially in the virtual environment. I'm currently in my room, and that's where I took my interviews.
Okay.
So there was also the stress from like, is the internet going to go out? Is it going to be a loud noise, someone doing construction?
Yeah.
Um, so that was definitely a lot of my fears before interviews. Fortunately, um, as I was going through interviews, the fears mitigated. Just having that experience helped.
Right.
And as I went through, I just felt more comfortable, more at ease, and just was overall better.
Right. I can imagine that the first one versus the last one, by the fourth one or the last one, you already know kind of like the general flow if it's been similar. So there's at least, a sense of calm, right, compared to
Mhm.
your first one. And so how did you prepare for your interview?
Yeah. So I would have to say the main thing that helped me prepare for my interview was mock interviews.
Okay.
So um, the week before I knew my interview was supposed to be, I asked my PI if he could contact faculty who could potentially help me interview, and he did. I had
Okay.
two mock interviews with faculty that were not quite in my field, but were tangential. So I'm in genetics, so we got general genetics faculty, and I just had a couple mock interviews. Um, it was perhaps they asked me real questions as if they were doing a real interview. Went through the 30-minute process, got feedback, and did it a couple times. And that's probably the thing that helped me the most calm down from my fears. Just knowing the experience and going through what questions would be. And another way I practice is immediately before my interviews, say about 15, 20 minutes before my interviews, I would go on the faculty's website, into their
Hmm.
lab website, and just look at their research, understand what they're doing, think of how that interacts with what I'm doing. And that's just to help with the conversation once it inevitably goes to like maybe they want to ask questions or what you know. So it just helps interact with the faculty during the interviews. It actually did help.
Yeah. So you were able to ask them questions probably about their research once they started talking about that? Because I feel like faculty always end up talking about their research a little bit in their interviews.
Oh yeah. I, for every single one of my interviews, it was. This is also why the mock interview helps. It was very standard questions. It always started with "Tell me about yourself." So it's like,
Hmm.
okay, I answered this question before. I know how to say it now. The next thing was, okay, here's the research. I know how to answer that. I did it before. And then immediately after is like, if I'm able to make those connections with their research, that just helps the conversation go along. Because the more natural the conversation is, I think the calmer I felt, and it just
Hmm.
helped the entire process.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Definitely. And it's also like part of the mock interview, right? Is there's a difference between like thinking about what you would say to a question, right? Like if they were to ask you like what's your greatest like weakness or whatever, right? But it's different when you have to like verbalize the answer and try to be like concise and clear. So that's why mock interviews are so useful
Oh yeah.
because
Mhm.
you like have the opportunity to like practice what you would say if it were a real one. Um, and so kind of going off of like the question part, and so was there a question that you felt the most comfortable answering?
Yeah, I would say that first question they ask is the tell me about yourself.
Okay.
Um, I know that's a hard question for a lot of people, but first I felt
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, I can do this part. This is easy. So
You're like, it's about me.
yeah, it's fine. So I know I've previously heard from the mock interviews and even from other people, it's like they do like want to know about you, like your
Right.
background coming to this point. So I said a little line. It's like, okay, hometown's El Paso, Texas. Then I told him my undergrad, told him I fell in love with research and human genetics and
Mm-hmm.
what led me to being at Penn
Right.
and what led me to that interview. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they liked it. It was a nice little conversation starter.
Right. Right. Because yeah, I feel like that question, it's interesting that that's the one you felt the most comfortable because that's such a broad question, right? That like anyone that hasn't practiced what they would say, right, might like immediately go into their research of like this is what you want to hear, but they're gonna ask you about your research. So you want to tell them about yourself, if you have hobbies or like where you're from and things like that. So that's great that that was what you felt comfortable answering. What about the least comfortable question you felt or that yeah.
Yeah, that actually, the research question was the least comfortable one. So,
Okay.
yeah, so it's like, I think when you're doing your research, you're always thinking, it's like, okay, I've been doing this for a few months or maybe a few years. I know this. But then when you have to, as you said, sit down and talk with someone who only tangentially knows your field,
Hmm.
that makes you really think about, like, okay, what do I need to say so they understand what I'm doing and they understand the impact of my research?
Right.
So even going through my mock interviews, I know one mock interviewer, and even during my interview, asked like, "All right, what is my current research?" And
Hmm.
it's like, "All right, that's easy." And then another one asked like, "What more my past few research experiences?" Which happened about a year ago. It's like, okay,
Right.
this is a bit more difficult. So
Hmm.
going through research by research and tying those together, that was just a little more stressful.
Right. And so was it stressful during the mock interviews as well as during your like actual interviews or more so during the mock interviews, but you were able to like prep what you would say for your real interview?
Yeah. I would say probably the most stressful time was the mock interview, especially with those
Okay.
questions, because
Right.
it was all right. I have an idea what I'm saying, but I've never done it before. Then okay, I've said it once, then I've said it
Hmm.
again, and then I just go and go and go. And I know for me, um, my interviews and even with my mock interviews, they were spaced over a few days.
Okay.
So what that let me do is I had an interview, I thought of what I said, what I could have done better, and sleep on that. The next day interview, and having that time to decompress and reconsider what I'm doing and how it actually went, and then how to prepare next
Hmm.
one. I think that just really helped with me overall just throughout the entire process.
Right. Right. Because at the end of the day, you want to have some type of elevator pitch for each of your research, either projects or like research experiences, so that if they do ask you that, then you can say like general, right? Like a general, like 2 to 5 minute thing, and then they can ask you more in depth after that,
Yeah,
is what I
I
imagine.
I know when I was one of my very first mock interviews, uh, he gave he gave me amazing advice on how to actually do the whole research talk and
Okay.
to really just frame it into like five different points. It was the introduction, the methods, or the introduction, what your goal is, the methods, your results, and then future directions.
Hmm.
So if you could think of those five different points and put it into a nice story, that's golden. And another way to think of it is just think of a paper's abstract.
Right.
Just make an abstract out of your research.
Yeah. That's really good advice. And so how many people did you interview with? Since you said like it was spaced out, how many um
I interviewed with four people. So it was like one on one day, then another on one day, and then the last two on the third day.
hmm.
And pretty easy, as I said. The time between really helped out.
Right. Right. That's great. And so did they tell you that if they were part of the admissions committee or like they were just faculty that you were interested in? Did you like know that beforehand or you like researched their names and then found out by yourself?
So they weren't I don't know if they were on the admissions committee. I know they weren't particularly faculty that maybe in my application I said, oh, I want to talk with this specific person. But I know they were in the department I was interested in.
Okay.
And I was given their names about a week before my actual interviews. So that gave me time to, okay, I see their interest. I can go with the website, see that type of stuff. But it wasn't like I was possibly gonna immediately work with that person, or that was the thought.
Yeah. And so the other question I have for you is, so at the end of the interview, they usually ask, right, do you have any questions for me? So did you have a question kind of like thought of that that you asked all of the people that you were interviewing with, or like were your questions more like person specific?
Um, I think for me, the way I planned it out is I had three questions I had planned out. And my idea
Okay.
was, and the way I did it is I have these three planned out questions. For each person, I'm going to ask them two of the three.
Okay.
And it was like real easy questions of like how I was interested in the school. Like I, for example, asked, what was something you learned about the school once that you actually got on campus and started doing your research with other people?
Hmm.
And all the professors had an answer. They were really happy with that question. Another question I have that is a little bit more hardball is um, asking the professors or faculty what type of issues keep you up at night. What type of
Okay.
issues keep you up at night,
Hmm.
and hopefully that's to get an answer if they're worried about funding, if they're worried about their students' research, if they're worried about collaborators. And I think that really helped me at least to get an idea of at least a little bit of that hidden culture at the schools of what they're kind of worried about and what they think about.
Hmm.
So those were two of my questions. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those are great questions, right? Because you, A, learn about the institution, right? And the faculty when they give you an answer. And I'm sure like that one of like what keeps you up at night, that they'll keep thinking about that question because it's like, huh, well, it does keep me up at night. So they'll definitely
Hmm.
remember you. And so,
Definitely.
yeah. And so the last question is, so if basically, if you think about someone that is going to go through this process, right, through virtual interviews, like what advice would you give someone that is going to go through it, or something you wish you knew before you would have gone through yours?
Um, in terms of what advice I would give to someone, as I've been saying, is like do mock interviews. Mock
Hmm.
interviews are fantastic. Um, a lot of the faculty that would be doing these that will help you with mock interviews have previously probably been on admissions committees, so they probably have questions and have been through the process and give you really good advice.
Hmm.
It also helps the just to get that experience because really once you've gone through one interview, you've gone through 100.
Yeah,
They're very similar questions. So once you've done it, once you've practiced, you're good. And I think something that I've been told, that I was told, and I realized only after actually going through my interviews is it really is a conversation.
right.
I don't think the faculties aren't there to trick you up. They're not trying to get one up on you. They're not trying to kick you down or anything like that. They really are hoping to talk to a potential student and just really have a conversation about what you're interested in. So just stay calm and it'll really be fine.
Yeah, I remember I did my interviews through Skype when Skype was a thing. Now there's like so many other platforms that are amazing. But yeah, I remember being so nervous and then realizing that it is a conversation. And I feel like people tell you over and over again that it is a conversation, and then like you can't help but be nervous until you like go through one, and then you're like, oh yes, okay, this isn't that bad. And then you go through your other ones. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for giving us this advice, and good luck with the rest of your interviews. So yeah, thank you so much.
All right, thanks for having me.